My name is JD McCormick. I'm the chairman of the American Healthy Alternatives Association. We advocate for hemp products, primarily the consumer cannabinoids, in their current market availability, and advocating that consumers and small business owners should continue to have access to these products. I wanted to update you guys. We've had a lot of things happen over the last 8 months. I know that, since the start of last session, many of you have seen many things happening across the country. Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, many of the states that we have associations in have been working diligently on these issues. All things hemp, all things Delta-8 is probably a familiar cannabinoid to you. And I wanted to kind of give everyone an update and give a state of the states address. So last year in Florida, we started at the end of December, beginning of the session, early January, with a couple of bills that aimed to further regulate hemp products. Now, these bills inherently weren't necessarily terrible, but definitely needed some work. And so, in working and advocating in the Capitol, we worked with quite a few legislators on the issues, and were able to defeat those bills. In Georgia, a couple of bills were filed, one of which, apparently was mistakenly written to ban Delta-8 products and ban major consumer hemp products. In fact, throughout the session and towards the end of session, we spoke with many legislators and were able to find common ground that this issue needed more work, and we're able to kind of kill those bills. So then in Tennessee, of course, at the beginning of session, January 11th, a good friend of mine called me in Tennessee and said that he had a bad bill. It had a tax associated with it, which isn't always a bad thing, but I think just in principle, you don't want to kind of give up a tax your first go around. So it had a tax in it. It had some other regulatory language that definitely needs some work. And so we worked diligently on that first bill. And then throughout session, recognized that there would probably be some more bills coming down the pipeline. And of course, a bill was then presented that was truthfully, terrible. It aimed to ban hemp products, all things Delta-8, etc. And in working with the bill sponsor and many, legislators, were able to, have a committee hearing where we brought stakeholders, law enforcement officials, to bear and had them speak on the issues. After a few hard weeks, we were able to amend that bill and work with the legislators to have that bill amended and turned into a regulatory bill. Now, towards the end of session, of course, that bill died, but of course we get another year of status quo. Now, North Carolina is facing a different issue altogether. Their hemp pilot program was on the cusp of expiring. When I was contacted to come and help in North Carolina, I reached out to a few friends there locally, kind of got the lay of the land, and was able to work with my local contacts and some really great folks to extend and really now it's kind of forever codified in law hemp's legality in North Carolina, and until it's changed otherwise, maybe a new bill, maybe a regulatory bill or amendment is presented next year, but as it stands, another year of status quo. So now South Carolina. I think many of you are familiar with some of the things that have been happening in South Carolina. There's a lot of questions. Is Delta-8 legal? Are other hemp products legal in South Carolina? The short answer is technically no, they are not legal. The Attorney General formed an opinion and actually wrote an opinion letter stating that Delta-8 and other cannabinoids are in fact illegal. I've spoken to a few retailers there that have been raided or, charged criminally for carrying these products. In fact, today is the 2nd of September, and just last week a round of letters went out in York County, South Carolina, from the local sheriff there saying that Delta products are illegal and anything that contains THC is illegal. So there's a lot of things left to be solved there, a lot of hard work going into that effort. I think that South Carolina is a great state with many great people, and I think that many of their consumers and small business owners would really love some relief and some help. Virginia, after one of the hardest legislative fights I've ever been a part of, I almost said had the pleasure of being a part of, but that was, in fact, definitely not pleasurable. It was one of the hardest fights I've ever been a part of. And when I came into the fold in early March, the bill that aimed to ban Delta 8 had been voted on, or was soon to be voted on the floor. Technical term for the final vote before it goes to the governor. And we got involved. I brought in my PR team, myself. We were able to find some really good people there in Virginia to help us. And in the last few days, right before the vote, we were able to kind of make some noise and make some calls to some legislators. And ultimately, we were unsuccessful. The bill was voted favorably. It was sent to the governor's desk. We spent the next few weeks, advocating with the governor's office. We had meetings with the agriculture secretary, deputy secretary, many other legislators, in an attempt to have the governor send down recommended amendments that would be favorable to the industry. In fact, what happened was the governor then sent down, his recommended amendments were worse than the original bill. I'll say that. So when we got the recommended amendments back from the governor and recognized how bad they truly were, we recognized we had a very short window. We had to work harder than we have ever worked. I actually drove up to Virginia and spent, the better part of a week, dedicated to making meetings with legislators, doing our very best to get our message out. We worked with a couple other local groups, and were able to shift the opinion. When the Senate came back into what is affectionately called their veto session, they went back through, and they do this for all of the governor's recommended amendments. This year they had about 100 recommended amendments come back down from the governor's office. It's procedural. They go through and they say, we would like the governor's recommended amendments. All in favor, vote aye. All in opposition, vote nay. And so they go through the whole process, and then they get to our bill. And it was, magic watching both the Democrat side and the Republican side seemingly agree that the bill needed a lot of work. And, whatever the intended purpose, whether the Republicans wanted more regulation or the Democrats wanted more freedom on the issue or whatever it was, I think that specifically watching all of them go through and pick apart the bill and say that it needs a lot of work. So when the governor's recommended amendments to the hemp bill came back up, the legislature, the Senate, all of them started laughing and joking and, saying it needed some work. And you could see many people whispering in their seats and many aides going back and forth. It was funny at one point, one of the Senate members, called for a recess or a break and said, we want to recess until 4:20. And it was funny. He's an older gentleman. He didn't understand. So when he called to recess for 15 minutes, he came back in at 4:20, and all the rest of the senators, a lot of them started laughing. I got a picture of it, a screenshot of that, the live stream. It was pretty funny. So they come back, and in a landslide vote, both the Republicans and the Democrats voted down on the underlying bill and the governor's recommended amendments, effectively stopping the issue in its tracks. Now, over the course of the next month, we heard rumbles that they wanted to, legislate this issue through the budget. And I'm sure many people are aware that you can legislate in the budget. You can put language into the budget amendments, and when you vote in the final budget, you can sneak in some language and have some legislative actions occur. And so what they did was, in the budget, they gave the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, that I often reference references VDACs. They gave VDACs some money to hire more enforcement officers, some more inspectors, and kind of laid out some language that they thought was appropriate for the issue. Now, when we spoke to many of the legislators in this process, the legislators said, "Oh yeah, we want to make sure it's legal. We like the products. We like the idea of the products. We're glad that the hemp industry is strong in Virginia." VDACs, Virginia Department of Agriculture, took it upon themselves to read into that language and find that the word extracts, if you use that definition or use one of the versions of that definition, you can say that because Delta 8 is not just kind of squeezed from the plant, maybe like orange juice, that it's not an extract. Because it does go through a refinement process, it's not strictly an extract. So they have since taken the position that Delta 8 edibles are illegal, and they set up a task force. That task force is comprised of a representative from the Office of the Attorney General of Virginia. The Department of Agriculture has, I think, 3 or 4 representatives, maybe 4 or 5 even, and a few other government officials, including, I think, their representative from the state laboratories that will be testing these products, and maybe a couple of other scientists. So this task force seemingly has gone through the issue and has put a lot of public comment. I think the first meeting of the task force, they went over some issues, and presented some states that have taken a really bad approach or negative approach to regulating hemp products, which is, for lack of a better term, kind of shown some bias that I think that the task force, doesn't like Delta 8 or wanted to get rid of it, etc. Now, the second meeting, after they got a lot of feedback from the public, they actually presented Florida, West Virginia, and a couple other states that do a really good job of regulating hemp products. And so they are showing both sides. A very strict, prohibitive policy, i.e. maybe Colorado or some other state that has taken a negative approach to Delta 8, versus Florida, West Virginia, North Carolina, that either have kind of loose regulations or fairly good regulations that I think, like Florida, for example, regulate the products very well, that include labeling requirements, testing requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So Virginia is, I know I've talked on this state a lot. There's a lot to be done there, a lot of hard work moving through, the remaining months until we get through the election and move into next session. There's a lot of hard work. Our state president there, Jan, has been to 20 plus fundraisers and events held by legislators, making sure that our issue is being heard, and that we are, there and are part of the conversation. So now I'll say, task force wise, remember I just referenced a task force in Virginia. Another task force, in fact, in Colorado, is made up of many government officials, again, regulating bodies like CDPHE, the Colorado Health Department, the medical marijuana enforcement agency there, or medical marijuana enforcement body. I can't remember the exact name, but quite a few cannabis stakeholders, cannabis companies. And in fact, I think of the 18 or 19 members of this task force, only one of them sells hemp products or manufactures Delta 8 products. So it's very, what I'll say is skewed or leans towards cannabis regulation and the benefit of the cannabis companies. We're working very diligently in the background to make sure that our voices are heard. We want to make sure that the hemp industry is not pushed into the background, and that we know that we gave it our best shot. It's hard. There are many people that I think in Colorado that like things the way they are. They like that the cannabis dispensaries control all things cannabis. They like that the government is strictly regulating that. And I think the federally legal Delta 8 products, in their opinion, probably reared their ugly head, and I think is probably a thorn in their side, is maybe a way to put that. Now, obviously, of course, in our opinion, Delta 8 is wonderful, right? It's a great product. It's federally legal. Interstate commerce is strong. It's the first time many of these states have had access to legal hemp products or legal THC products, and is kind of a part of the greater cannabis renaissance. So I think that Colorado moving forward is going to be a hard-fought state, and again, lots and lots of effort are going into fighting that state. So, a lot of hard work there. Now, Minnesota. Minnesota, interestingly enough, has legalized THC. They have legalized 5 milligrams per serving THC, 50 milligrams per package. Now, I think the intent of this legalization, although maybe well placed or, well intentioned, I think the language was kind of, by my estimation, passed quickly with not many eyes on it. I know that I was made aware of the issue, really in its final weeks, moving through the legislature, in my attempts to organize and help some of the people organize there, was unsuccessful. The bill passed, and in really kind of short order, in the weeks that followed, many of the cities, right, so the municipalities, the cities, were developing plans of attack or plans of action around this legalization of cannabis or legalization of THC products. And what seems to be the common action is these cities are placing 1-year moratoriums on the sale of THC products. I think from a city council perspective, that's probably appropriate. Maybe that's the appropriate action in their minds. But I think what many of the local council members and local municipalities don't understand is that these products have been sold in their state for years. They're sold in vape shops, in smoke shops, in CBD stores, hemp-only stores, in health food stores, mom and pop delis. Your local supplement stores have been selling hemp-based products for years. And so these 1-year moratoriums on the sale of hemp-based products, depending on the language used, is actually going to stunt the growth of the industry and harm the industry that is already existing. Now, I think in their minds, they're thinking that these products are about to be sold. They haven't been sold yet. They're brand new. Oh man, it's a brand new law. These things are, for the first time becoming legal. I don't think that they understood that, in fact, there was a vibrant hemp industry in their state and in their cities already. And these 1-year moratoriums, in fact, are going to harm that industry. So I think one of the things we're looking to do in Minnesota, we've already put together a great group of individuals, business owners, consumers, people that are very interested in this issue. I think one of the things we're going to do is obviously advocate and work very hard to have our voices heard. But many of these cities have already taken this action, and many cities are aiming to take more action on this issue in the coming weeks and months, leading into the next session. So we have to move quickly. These cities are again, many of them are surrounding suburbs of Twin Cities, but many of them are far away from the Twin Cities, kind of out in the farmlands there, and it's going to be difficult to have a team of people, advocates, driving around and going to these city council meetings. And so I think one thing I might say in Minnesota is don't lose hope, right? Keep fighting the good fight. Don't get the idea that government is so big and all powerful that they can just destroy the industry, right? I think that a recent study that came out of a Pew Research study shows that 90% of Americans want some form of legal cannabis, and I think that again, this industry, the hemp industry, the greater Delta 8 industry, etc., is a symptom of the greater cannabis renaissance. So we can't forget that many of the people in those cities and in those counties want these products, right? The only reason there's an industry is because there's demand. People want them. People are buying them. And for these city council members who oftentimes, are not walking into vape shops or smoke shops or hearing the concerns of the people that are involved in the industry, are just kind of taking action and saying this isn't we don't want to see a proliferation of legal products and bad products, and we got to protect the public. I think issue being that the industry already exists, has existed there for years. So it's one thing to say that these city council members in many of these cities are just acting right out of interest of public health and regulating the industry, etc. It's a whole other thing when you say that they probably just don't know that these products have been legal and have been sold in their cities for years at this point. So next one is Maryland. This will be kind of my final state. Maryland also has a task force. Maryland's task force will be made up of representatives from the Maryland Department of Agriculture, their MMCC, which is the Medical Marijuana Control Authority, is their marijuana regulating body, a representative from the Maryland Healthy Alternatives Association, and another representative, I believe, from the Maryland Hemp Coalition. So Maryland, through session, I think there was a bill that was filed, and as it moved, many of our members and some of our leaders there in the state, got engaged very early on and quickly, took action and went to committee hearings, spoke publicly about the issue, and were able to have many conversations with legislators in the background, explaining to them that, again, these products are federally legal. They've been legal. They've been sold for years in their state, and there's a large demand for them. And so now, as this task force meets for its first time in the next couple of weeks, one of the things we want to point out is that, again, they're legal. By and large, they are, being sold at scale, and safely. I would say that many of the companies that are members of our association, many of the companies that we work with, self-regulate, and they do a very good job at it. They work with large third-party laboratories. We could go down the list of many of the great laboratories that are testing these products for all things from pesticides, heavy metals, bacteria, mycotoxins, and many other things that could be concerning. In fact, some states have an entire list or have developed a list of harmful constituents or harmful materials that, when inhaled or ingested, or maybe are commonly found in illegal hemp products or illegal cannabis products, and these labs are taking notice of that. And they're looking for these lists, and they're actively adding these things to their testing profiles and standard operating procedures or SOPs to make sure that the products that we're testing are as safe as we can possibly make them. I think moving forward, all of these states that I have just mentioned, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Utah, Nebraska, Colorado, Minnesota, Maryland, these states need our help. They need funds. They need money. They need help for PR, right, to get out in front of local news media to tell their stories. They need help for finding fellow advocates and arranging events to have people come together and speak about these issues. They need help in lobbying. I know that lobbying is kind of a bad word, right? But I think many people think of lobbyists, lobbying as this dark money thing. But in many cases, lobbyists, in fact, are the voice of the people. They are hearing what we're saying. They're taking that and spreading our message to many of the legislators that they work with. So as we move through, I think one of the things we want to pay attention to is we're in an election cycle. It is an election year. Many states have had their primaries already. We're moving into the general election in the next couple of months. After the general election, if there's a major shift, we have to get in front of these legislators. There's going to be new legislators in a lot of these states. A lot of people that have never heard of our issue. A lot of people that may be champions for us, may talk to us and hear us out and say, you know what, I like the industry. I like the idea of the industry. My sister, aunt, brother, cousin use CBD products or Delta 8 products for pain or discomfort or whatever it is. And I think moving through after the election, November, December, in the next few months, moving into that time frame, we need to get more organized. We have to pay attention to the issues. We have to be aware of the issues and what's going to happen come January, when many of these states go back into legislative session, and what kind of language we can expect to see. So again, I appreciate you listening to this. If you have any questions, we'll put the link in the description down below for American Healthy Alternatives Association in all of our states. We have associations in. We have individual state leaders in all of those states. Of course, I'm the national chairman, but I tell people all of the time, if you contact me, if you contact the National Association, and we don't have the answer on the tips of our tongues, we can get those answers for you in minutes. Because we have this hierarchical structure, we have individual state leaders, board members, boards, and members that span every sector of the industry, manufacturers, retailers, distributors. We can figure out the answer to any question you might have. So please, go to the link, go to AmericanHealthyAlternatives.org, sign up for the association, go to your state association links if you live in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, the Carolinas, etc. They all have individual state websites. We have consumer memberships for $10 a month. We have low retail memberships for as low as $100 a month, and I think they go up to maybe $500 a month. Manufacturers, distributors also can join, and we ask that any questions you might have, if you're interested in the issues, we are going to be setting up weekly calls via Zoom and setting up events for us to all come together, whether that be kind of an expo or convention style event, or maybe just a conference where we have public speakers that come up and speak about the issues. We want to engage with you. We want to talk to you about the issues. We want you to be aware as business owners, consumers in the industry about what's happening. So again, thank you very much. Thanks for listening. I know I talked nonstop for quite a while there, but thank you very much. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.